Hello, how are you doing? We are fast approaching the winter season, so I have 10 different festive or wintry or winter adjacent books that I'm looking forward to reading over the next 3 to 4 months, and I'd love to know if you want to join me in reading any of these books, or if you have read any of them, let me know what you think in the comments below. Or do you have any wintry books that you're looking forward to? And I know we're not actually in the winter season yet, that doesn't occur until later in December, but it has got very cold here in London. We had our very first snowfall on the 1st of December. It was very light snow, but it was actually snow. And I woke up fairly early this morning and I went for a walk in my local park. And it was just gorgeous how everything was frost covered and it looked so festive and moody. And even in the garden, there were still some roses there and they were all frost covered. And I felt like I was wandering around Belle's castle or something like that. So it really got me in the mood for winter. And also I've been enjoying this tea advent calendar that my husband very kindly got me from Whittard's. Today's flavor was peppermint tea, so I have a mug of that here in my Virginia Wolf mug. You can probably see it steaming there because it's quite hot still. So I'm going to discuss why I'm so interested in all of these different books now. Either their cover is kind of wintry, or the subject matter, or just the mood of them feels like it is suited for the winter time. So the very first book that I'm currently reading with my online book club is Claire Keegan's Antarctica, and this is a collection of stories about a whole range of subject matter. There's one story about a girl who goes missing, another about a secret tryst that occurs, and one is set around a party around Christmas and New Year's. And yeah, the cover of this reprint edition is so wintry and really suited for it. And I'll put a link to my online book group below if you want to check it out and join us in reading this book. And Claire Keegan's writing is just superb. Although a weird thing about this book and this reprint of the UK edition is that the stories in here are ordered differently from the US publication of this book, which occurred a number of years ago. So they have all the same stories, but they're just ordered differently. And I don't know why that is, but it makes it a bit confusing with an international book club that you have online. And also, I think some of the stories might have been edited over the years, because I think some of these stories are quite old, and so some people in the group have discussed how they're looking at two different editions, and some of the actual wording in the sentences is so different. And I think it's partly because this is an author who doesn't produce all that much fiction, relatively to some other authors, and now that she's become an international superstar, they keep bringing out her books, and so I guess she might just revise some of these stories over time in bringing them out in a new edition. I'm not sure, but it doesn't matter because her writing is excellent. Next I have some more recent books, and then I also have some classics and some slightly weirder books that I think will be so great over the winter season. So first, there's a new novel by Mike McCormack called This Plague of Souls, which is about a man who had left his hometown in Ireland a number of years ago, but he's returned and found that there's not much left of his former life, that his family has disappeared and people don't recognize him, but he gets these strange phone calls from someone who seems to know everything about his life. And this theme of homecoming and whether we can ever really return to the homes that we once left just feels so reminiscent of the festive season for me, since I'm from America and I now live in England and have done for quite a long time. So every time I go back to America, it feels slightly stranger to me and I feel slightly more distanced from it. So I'm really looking forward to reading about that experience. A novel with a very wintry cover, and which is also about a homecoming, edition is The Wolf Border by Sarah Hall, and this has been sitting on my shelves ever since it first came out, I think 3 or 4 years ago, and I've always meant to get to it, so it's one of those books, and it's about a woman who I think was born in the UK, but has lived a lot of her life in the US, working as a scientist, working with wolf populations, but then she's called back to the UK and partly to reintroduce a species of wolf to the countryside here. And so it's about the struggles of trying to readjust to her home environment and whether she can ever fully come home. But it's also about larger political issues. I think there's the issue of potential Scottish independence going on in the background. And Sarah Hall is just such an interesting writer. Now for a modern classic novel, and I have an Everyman's Library edition of Independent People by Haldor Laxness, who of course is the Icelandic author who won the Nobel Prize for literature, and of course Iceland, that just makes me think of snow, and so seems very appropriate for winter. And this is about a family and a rural village struggling to survive in the very stark Icelandic landscape, and it's recording their daily lives and struggles, but also incorporates sagas and legends from Iceland's history into this story about rural people's lives. And what I've read by Laxness before, I've really enjoyed, and I loved going to visit Iceland before because it's such a strange, almost like moon-like landscape that's so fascinating, and what a rich culture and fascinating people. So I'd love to read more about this location. A classic novel first published in 1939 that I partly want to read because the cover of this Virago edition is just so beautiful, and that is Black Narcissus by Rumer Godden. And this is set in the Himalayas, so a very sort of snowy, cold landscape, and is about an ancient place there which is converted into a home for some nuns that go to live there and form an order there to work with the local community. And so following the story of a number of these nuns and what occurs to them when they start living in this high altitude, in this very foreign environment from where they came from. And I also partly want to read this because I saw a reissue of the classic film made from this novel at the BFI in London recently, which is so dramatic, and it's such a beautiful film because the backdrops of this film were painted and they just look gorgeous and so beautiful, and so, but there are some slightly dated things about the story, at least in the film. I don't know about the book. I assume in the book as well. So I'm interested to see if that is in the story as well. I kind of assume it is, but this is a book from another time, but it's one that is a much beloved story, and I've always meant to read it. Another novel from last century, which was first published in 1930, is The Shudder of Snow by Emily Holmes Coleman, and this was reprinted last year, I think, and it has snow in the title, so seems very appropriate for winter. But it explores the life of a woman with postpartum depression and a lot of mental health issues who is put in a facility to deal with this, and so it's following her story. And I think this book was really groundbreaking for the time of exploring this subject matter and this very serious issue that this woman faces in the story, and which hadn't been talked about in literature much before. So this is meant to be a very powerful book. Nostalgia by Mircea Cartarescu, the great Romanian writer, and I always feel like around Christmas time I get very nostalgic nostalgic and thinking about the past and people that are not with me anymore. So because this is called nostalgia, it feels appropriate for this season. And I read Cartarescu's novel Solenoid earlier this year, and I think it is one of the most extraordinary books I've ever read. So I've been wanting to read more of his work, and everyone says that this novel is excellent. It's described as a dreamlike story set in communist Bucharest, and so exploring that political situation and the lives of people living there, but also blends in surrealism and oddities and kind of myth and fables, and I just love how he blends all these things together to create these very powerful and resonant stories. And so I'm so excited to read this. To leave with the Reindeer by Olivia Rosenthal, who's a French author, and it has reindeer in the cover, so feels appropriate for the season. But I've been told this is a very strange book, but it's about a woman who's preparing herself for an independent life for the very first time, and she explores this through human and animal relationships, and I'm not sure how that plays out, but I am so intrigued. Another French novel is The Annual Banquet of the Gravediggers Guild by Mathias Enard. And this is a story about a researcher looking into agrarian life, and he goes to the countryside and a small village to study the people there and their way of life. But they have an annual festival there where for 3 days there's a truce between death and the living, and this takes place with a large banquet, and of course around Christmas time, you know, it's about having lots of food and reconnecting with a lot of people. So it just sort of reminds me of that. But of course, it sounds like quite a dark and strange story, but that feels appropriate for the winter season as well. And finally, to get back into more of a straightforward festive mood, I have a collection of Christmas short stories, which I've actually had for a few years, and I've been steadily reading aloud these stories to my husband over a period of time. And these are a lot of classic and some more modern stories from authors from Hans Christian Andersen and Anton Chekhov and O. Henry and Dorothy Sayers and Tove Jansson, and so really fascinating range of authors and stories and viewpoints represented all around the Christmas season. And it just has this like beautiful snowy cover in blue and white, and I just adore having this book and slowly like ticking through these stories that I've been reading aloud, and we tick off every time we read one. So those are all the books that I'm looking forward to reading over the winter months. Like I said, I'd love to know if you want to join me in reading any of these. Are you intrigued by any of these stories, or what do you think of any of these books? If you have read them, please let me know about that, or any other wintry reads you're looking forward to. But I hope you're doing well and staying warm and have lots of tea or coffee or your hot drink of choice to snuggle up with for a good read over the winter season. And I'll speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.